Hey everybody, welcome to the group time where we're going to learn so that we can discuss. I'll go through a devotional here and then you're going to take a little bit of a time to discuss what we just talked about in the Bible. And so your group leaders already have questions, they've looked through them, and you'll take time to, after we've looked through God's Word, discuss how it applies to your life and where you see these things happening. So let's jump right into the message and we'll get going. We're going to talk about something today that used to mean a mom, a dad, 2 kids, goldfish, dog, minivan, white picket fence, and a house. But today, maybe more than ever, families look a whole lot different. I know for my family, it started with mom, dad, 4 kids, and no dog because we were renting. But eventually, it got a lot more complicated. Now there's mom, dad, kids, their husbands or wives, their kids, their animals, their schedules, and their homes. And it's not just roles that get complicated. It's also the makeup and who's there, the personality traits that get jumbled together. And I'm sure you feel the same way that I have felt about my family, which is family is complicated. Of course, your family has unique qualities about them that are different from everybody else's. But it's true, all families are complicated and they can get more complicated as time goes on. And they're fragile too. And what goes into all that is part of the fact that your role is defined inside of your family. And I don't just mean son or daughter or brother or sibling or cousin. It's not what I'm talking about. What I do mean is that you play a specific role based on your personality. Sometimes the role we play are things like mediator. You want to find the peace, bring everybody together around it, and keep that peace going. Sometimes you're the avoider. Keep your head down and wait till it all passes so that way you're not in the chaos. Sometimes you're the instigator. You walk into a room and you want to mix it up. You're trying to find where the chaos is, maybe because you're just bored. Sometimes we're the rule follower. Maybe you play to the rules so that way when things happen, you're innocent, you didn't do it, and nobody can blame you for anything. And sometimes you're the comedian. Maybe, just maybe, you're the one that, even if it's positive or negative, you're trying to ease the tension by being funny. Maybe you're the historian. In every family, there's somebody that says, yeah, but mom, you did say, or dad, you said this last week, or I remember last week when you said this, or didn't you just say it? Inside of all these roles is you. You play one of these inside of your family. But a bigger question is, what role does your faith play in your family? And maybe that's the most complicated part of your family. It's not the roles, it's not who lives with you, it's not where you drive or who has the keys or who fills up the tank. None of that's complicated, but where your faith plays a role is. Now, a lot of families do a lot of different things with their faith. Some people do devotionals. Some people will watch a movie and create a tie to it. Some people don't bring it up at all because it's just plain awkward. But where you come in and where your faith comes in can make a big difference inside of your family. 2 things to know before we keep going, which is 1, your faith is not separate from your family. Your faith is not separate from your family. We all have a family, and it can get complicated, but that doesn't mean that your faith isn't related to your family. And 2, your faith can actually help your family. It doesn't have to be that you practice your faith outside of your family and then come home and be a completely different person. Your faith can help your family. In fact, we're not the first ones to have a complicated family. We're not the first ones to live with complicated roles. And we're not the first ones to struggle with our faith in our family. In fact, Jesus was around people who were just like his family. They spent 3 years working together, living together, creating memories together. They even had nicknames, and they all had roles and responsibilities inside of that group. And when Jesus met with these people, his closest followers, his disciples, and eventually his apostles, he talked to them about their faith because he knew that was the influence he had on them that could change everything. In fact, in John 13, Jesus sits down with his closest family as he's about to leave. John 13 says this, "It was just before Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own, who were with him in the world, he loved them to the end." Now, the people who were with him, he had loved from the beginning, who were in the world and to the end, those are his apostles. And he knew he was leaving them. What would you do if you knew you were leaving your family? If you were having the last meal you were going to have with them, what would you say? Now, I've been around work before where employees have either quit or been fired and it was their last time with everybody, and they certainly didn't express to everybody how much they loved them before they left. In fact, sometimes it was quite the opposite. They were trying to get in one more zinger, one more piece of their mind before they got out of there. Now, what would you say? And so he continues, and this is the next verse, verse 3. It says, Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God, and that he would return to God. Jesus knew that he was about to go to a cross and be tortured and crucified for you and for me so that we can go to heaven and be free of our sins. He knew that the apostles were going to have a really difficult time coming up. He knew that some of them would fracture and walk away from each other, and he had to say one more thing. And in fact, he didn't just say it, he showed it. Verse 4 and 5 say this: So he got up from the table where they were having dinner and took off his robe. This is like his jacket. He took off his jacket and he wrapped a towel around his waist. So he's about to go to work. And he poured water into a basin for a specific reason. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet. Already some of you are cringing about that, and you should be, because feet are disgusting. However, that was more true back then than it was today, and he's about to do something with it. He washed the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around them. This foot washing thing in certain denominations is something that they practice as a church, and we don't see as something that we have to do every time we meet together. But what Jesus was trying to communicate was an example, and he brings it up in a minute, but let me make sure we're clear on the foot washing thing. When they're washing each other's feet, typically, it's not Jesus or it's not somebody part of the group. What you would do is you would hire somebody at maybe below minimum wage, and you would tell them you're gonna wash everybody's feet as they come in. It's almost like saying, take off your shoes. However, you wore sandals, and back then there were animals in the street, there was sewage in the street, there was dirty water in the street, and when you walked into somebody's home, finally, after walking in the street, you had to get your feet washed because it was disgusting and you didn't want to do it, and you certainly didn't want to do it for your friends, and your friends or family didn't want to do it for you. So you would hire somebody just to make sure your feet were clean before you ate dinner. And the startling thing about all this is that Jesus stands up, puts a towel around his waist, maybe even waving off the minimum wage employee, and says, I got it, I'm gonna take this one. And what would you do if you were in that situation? I mean, what would you be sitting there doing if Jesus were walking over to you, tying a towel around his waist to come wash your feet? And Jesus takes this moment, his last moment with his family, not to say one more zinger, one more piece of his mind, but he takes an opportunity to lay down his power and influence and take on the role and posture of a servant for the people that are closest to him. And he says this: When Jesus came to Simon Peter, verse 6-7, Peter said to him, Lord, why are you washing my feet? Lord, that's not just, hey buddy or sir, this is Lord, this is the person who has authority and position and influence over me. Why are you washing my feet? Almost like, if you had commanded me, I would have washed your feet, because you have the position and I don't. Lord, why are you washing my feet? And Jesus replied, you don't understand what I'm doing, but someday you will. That's a loaded statement right there, and Jesus doesn't let it hang. He goes into it. And he's got to explain this because Peter's a little weirded out, because people who have position and influence and power over others don't lay it down to become a servant to other people. If anything, what we use is our power, position, and influence to get other people to do our dirty work for us. But that wasn't Jesus' game. Jesus had an opportunity to work with his guys to show them an example of how he wants them to operate in the future. If we act like a servant, we're going to get treated like a servant. So if we take a shot and do the dishes because we want to be kind to our family, we're afraid that we're going to be treated like that every time there's dirty dishes. Hey, that's kind of your role now, isn't it? That you're going to be a servant. So guess what? There's dirty dishes in the sink and you got to jump on them. So we avoid that kind of thing because we don't want to be put in that position, and Jesus doesn't avoid it. Jesus doesn't avoid it, but go ahead and ask the person in your home that doesn't avoid it. Ask the person in your home who does most of the cleaning and most of the ordering around your home how they feel about being assumed that they're going to do the work. It's probably somebody who takes the role of the servant in your home and communicates love to you most of the time. I'm hinting and winking at moms right now. They're the ones mostly doing the work in the home. And Jesus doesn't avoid the role of servant either. Verse 12, Jesus says this: After washing their feet, he put on his robe again, his coat, he sat down and he said, do you understand what I was doing? And they almost never did. Jesus was doing new things with his family constantly. Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord. And again, Peter had called him Lord, and what he's hinting at is the position and influence he has over them. And you are right, because that's what I am. That is the position I'm in. And he says this: and since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done for you. Now, if you go home tonight and you walk up to your family and start washing their feet, you're gonna get some weird looks. And I'm gonna get some weird calls because it sounds like I told you to go wash somebody's feet. But that's not the point. Jesus says it right there. I have given you an example to follow. Love each other. Now, it looks like this. When you put yourself in a position of a servant, when you humble yourself, when you get down in the dirty part of somebody's life, the feet for them, when they were walking around with poop and sewage and gross stuff all over, you humiliate yourself. You humiliate yourself in front of somebody because, like Jesus said in the beginning, he loved them so much all the way up to the point where he was about to leave. He loved them, so he humiliated himself. And that's the example Jesus is giving us. Love each other. Love the people closest to you so much that you show it to them. Saying that you love somebody and never showing it to them really isn't love. It's a feeling, but it's really not what Jesus was defining for us. If you love somebody so much, show them. In fact, if you love somebody so much, show them so that they can see it. Show them that they can see it. If you love somebody so much, show them so that they can see it, so that you're willing to be humiliated just so that they can see it. Jesus didn't just feel it in his heart, but he actually stood up, humiliated himself by taking on the role of somebody who was paid underneath minimum wage, got down with the dirty parts of somebody's life and cleaned it for them. That's love. And that's a difficult thing to do with the people closest to us because we have memories with them. But think about the position Jesus was in. He was doing it with a group of men that he knew very soon would deny even knowing him, would run away from him in his weakest moment, and one of them would actually betray him to his face. And he still got down in the dirtiest parts of their life in the role and posture of a servant just to clean it for him. That's love. That's humiliating yourself, knowing you're gonna get betrayed just to serve somebody. That's the truest expression of love. Now, if you need any incentives to lean into this, Jesus actually said this as soon as he was done. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them, which means you're gonna get God's undeserved favor in your life. You're gonna catch God's attention in your life just because you knew what I just said, you've heard it, and then you went and did it. God's gonna give you favor. Now, I would trade that in a heartbeat. The little position, the little bit of influence, and the little bit of clout I have so that God looks at me favorably. I would humiliate myself willingly if God would turn to me and bless me. If I could catch God's attention just for humiliating something that's temporary. That's powerful. Now, no matter what type of family you live in, the bottom line is this: love matters most. For Jesus, he could have protected himself and said, protection matters the most. I'm gonna make sure that nobody hurts me. But for him, love mattered the most. And for the family you live in, no matter what kind of family it is, no matter who lives with you, no matter what the dynamics are, love matters most with the people closest to you. And if love matters most, that means other things don't matter most. That means being right in an argument doesn't matter most. Getting the facts straight so everybody's on the same page doesn't matter most. Making sure you win and that other people see you favorably in your family doesn't matter the most. Love does. Let's do this. Let's be real practical. Who do you struggle with the most in your family? Now, maybe they don't live with you, but they're still in your family. Who do you struggle with the most? Like, if you're in a room with them for an extended period of time, it's not going to turn out well. Who do you struggle with the most? I would challenge you that what Jesus is doing is leaning towards you and saying, that's the one that you need to humiliate yourself for, to show them that you love them. Hey, you might be able to tell them through this humiliating service towards them, we may not be BFFs, we may not be really close, but that doesn't matter because I love you. Now, maybe not in so many words, maybe picking up shoes or doing the dishes or cleaning your room may not say all of those words at once, and it may not be an immediate result, but you are gonna communicate that I love you. Again, you may have some hesitations about this. Man, if I lean forward and do this, I'm gonna be treated like a servant. But the greatest part about this is when you do these things and you get treated like that, you are closer to the heart of Jesus than ever before, because that's exactly what he did. He got down, he lowered himself so that we knew that he loved us and that we could love other people. In fact, he said this would be the distinguishing mark for people who say that they follow him. He says it in verse 35 of John 13. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Not how much you know, not how many verses you have memorized, not your attendance at synagogue or church, none of those things. It will prove to the world around you that you are my follower, you're my disciple, if you love one another. because that's exactly what Jesus did for us. Can you imagine what our communities would look like? Can you imagine what your community would look like if they peered into your life, or it became evident, not just on birthdays, but on the everydays, that you took care of and loved your family? This is a divided world, but could you imagine what it would look like if we took care of this part of our lives first? If we took our complicated, not perfect, a little bit different looking families and loved them, served them, humiliated ourselves so that they could know that the people closest to us matter the most. And this might just be the perfect place for you to practice your faith. So when you step out into the world, your faith was honed by a love for the people closest to you. So remember, no matter what your family looks like, love matters the most.